Let's trade further, and remember, the beautiful idea is that if African countries trade with each other, manufacturers will find massive markets, and this will lift us out of poverty. Of course, however, some manufacturers will be hard hit when competition comes in from other countries who are now no longer facing barriers such as import tariffs. So suddenly everybody can play on a level playing field, and some of those manufacturers can be hard hit, especially in vulnerable and undiversified countries. Well, joining us from our Pretoria studio is Deputy Director General at the Department of Trade and Industry, Xolelwa Mlumbi-Peter. Deputy, thank you for being with us. So right now we've signed a framework in Kigali, President Cyril Ramaphosa. Are we on board all the way for free trade in Africa?
The agreement sets a very good basis for us to establish a free trade agreement. What has been signed is a framework agreement, but there's still a lot of work that still needs to be done to make the African free trade area functional. What is outstanding are still some of the annexes and appendices, but the legal framework does set a very good basis for us to promote free trade in terms of goods and services across the continent.
What sort of time frame are we looking at?
There is a built-in agenda to try and conclude the outstanding work, and the built-in agenda will be concluded by the end of this year in 2018. That will finalize all the outstanding annexes as well as the modalities that will set the basis for us to now negotiate on tariffs. However, there will have to be bilateral negotiations between countries towards the negotiation of tariff schedules. That work may take some time. However, what we have adopted as the continent is a principle of variable geometry, which allows countries that are ready to move with speed, while others that are not ready can follow.
Yeah, the idea is actually that we could do very well. We could be the Germany of Africa, doing very well out of a free trade area because we have a diversified economy, but some African countries aren't that fortunate. So there will still be tariff by tariff deals, basically, to protect the vulnerable.
We are establishing this continental FTA within a development integration agenda because we are mindful of the fact that the free trade agreement alone will not support sustainable development in the continent. For this to work, it has to be supported or complemented by industrial development and cooperation on industrial development amongst African countries, but also it must be supported by infrastructure development. That will ensure that all the countries are able to benefit from this arrangement, because we can only benefit if we are able to trade with each other. And the challenge so far has been that we are trading more with the outside world because we are producing similar products. So the potential to trade with each other is limited in this regard. So the focus now is to also ensure that we promote industrial development and the development of regional value chains, which will allow countries to diversify their productive base, but also ensure that we're able to address the productive capacity constraints as well as the supply side constraints through infrastructure development.
Yeah, and infrastructure we've been speaking about for so long. We need better roads to get our goods up into Africa. But some in South Africa not happy, the unions. Will the president be addressing their concerns about possible job losses?
South Africa actually stands to gain from this arrangement. Already without the free trade area across the continent, we are exporting 30% of our global exports to the rest of the continent. What this means now is that we'll be able to trade, once the CFTA is functional, we'll be able to trade on better terms than we are currently trading with, especially the countries in West Africa and North Africa, because we already have a trade agreement in Southern Africa through the Southern Africa Development Community Trade Protocol. We are already engaging the East African community through the tripartite free trade agreement. So the east side of the continent is relatively, within no time, will be concluding and implementing the SACU EAC agreement. But what this would mean is that we will now have additional market access, especially to the countries in West Africa and the countries in North Africa, which would mean that we would be able to have a larger market within which we can export our goods and services. And what is also important is that in the continent, we are able to trade more value-added products, because 63% of the exports to the rest of the continent is value-added trade. And that value-added trade supports industrial development and manufacturing in South Africa. But also, most importantly, it supports job creation in South Africa. So what that means is that with the larger market that we have, we'll be able to create more jobs, and also it will assist South Africa to move up the value chain.
Xolelwa, are we engaging with Nigeria? Because surely that is the dream for many South African manufacturers, to access that market, but they're not on board.
Nigeria is not necessarily, or it's not necessarily that it is not on board. What they have asked is time to engage with their domestic constituencies. Nigeria has actually been leading the process because they have been the chair of the negotiating forum, as well as the chair of the African Ministers of Trade. So discussions will continue with Nigeria. Of course, they have to first go through their own internal consultation process to put their stakeholders at ease and promote a broader understanding of what this free trade agreement would mean for Nigeria. For us, Nigeria is a critical market, and we were very excited to have Nigeria on board in this process, because it will mean more market access opportunities both ways, both for South African products to access the Nigerian market, but also the Nigerian stakeholders to be able to access the South African market, because this agreement is really based on reciprocity.
All right, so thank you very much for your time. That was the Deputy DG at the Department of Trade and Industry, Xolelwa Mlumbi-Peter. And remember, this is just the beginning. We've signed a framework, but South Africa is showing its commitment as the continent as a whole moves towards free trade.